Good morning, and welcome to LLT 121 Classical Mythology. I'm Joe Hughes. In today's class, we're going to be talking about the Odyssey of Homer. And when I'm done talking about the Odyssey of Homer, we will be done with today's class. We will be done with instruction for the semester. Let me go on record as saying that it has been a pleasure to teach each and every one of you, and that I hope to see you again in future classes during your sojourn here at Southwest Missouri State University, and that goes for all of you who are watching this on television too. Okay, that was the fun opening. Good morning and welcome to LLT 121 Classical Mythology. You see, Matt is working on an outtakes reel here, and I'm going to have to buy it from him at the end of the semester, and he hasn't told me how much it's going to cost. So I will be holding office hours immediately after class for you students who care to, bring me presents and stuff like that. It's for a good cause. When last we left off, Odysseus had washed up on the shore of an uncharted desert island named Phaeacia. You will remember Phaeacia. It's actually the land of the Phaeacians. Its name is Scheria. I don't care about Scheria. That's the name of the island. The people who live there are Phaeacians. That I do care about. They have just wined and dined Odysseus. And at the end of the dinner, after he's, eaten the food and drank all sorts of wine, listened to the nice songs and stuff like that, they say, "Now, stranger, tell us who you are. Where did you come here from?" And he says, "I'm Odysseus, darn it, king of Ithaca, and my fame reaches the heavens." Fame, I want to live forever. The Greek word for fame is kleos. Odysseus would like to say, too, that he has lots of arete, or virtue. He has so much arete that he has won by sacking cities, carrying off women, that he's bound to have lots of kleos or fame after he dies. As indeed Odysseus does, after all. Here it is, some 3,200 years after the fact, and here we are talking about the guy. He did get to be pretty famous. The thing that, and we don't have much time to go into this today, the Odyssey is worth its own class. The thing about Odysseus is he's got a different kind of arete, because we're going to see him in any number of situations on his travels, and we'll get through his travels pretty quickly, where he is capable of fighting his way out of a situation. He is capable of bullying his way, talking, but he would rather lie his way out of a situation. He would rather cheat his way out of a situation. He would rather fornicate his way out of a bad situation. The idea being that he has his own sort of arete. Meanwhile, over in Ithaca, tending the home fires, we've got Penelope. Penelope would dearly love to kick all of the suitors out of her palace. She would probably like to kill all of them. After all, they've been hanging around for the last few years, eating all of her food, living in her house, ordering her servants around, and being snotty to her son Telemachus. She can't do this, however, because she's female, a mere female, quote unquote, and therefore, can't really rack up the big arete points, can't rack up the big kleos points because she is a female, supposedly. Let me offer you just one little thingy before we launch into the exciting discussion of the Odyssey, which will all be lectures by me. Whenever we meet a goddess, or whenever we meet an intelligent woman, there's lots of them, in the Odyssey, they're always weaving. When we meet Calypso, she's a goddess. She doesn't have to work for a living. She's weaving. When we run into Circe, as we will shortly, she sits at a loom and weaves. Why is this? Yeah. Weaving back in those days is women's work. Let the men go chop each other in half and rule cities and carry off cattle. Women stay home and make clothes. Yeah, sure. I ask you to think about, or I ask you to compare the arts of war with the art of weaving. I mean, the art of war is basically, back in these days, the art of killing some other schmuck before he kills you and then bragging about it. There's not an awful lot to it. Compare weaving. I've tried to weave. I was very bad at it. We had a weaving project in 8th grade. I stunk at it. It's a creative art. It is a useful, constructive art. It takes intelligence. It takes nimbleness. It takes dedication. You could make the argument, and a very fine argument it would be, that weaving, being married now for some time, I agree with it more and more every year, is a metaphor in the Odyssey for the way that the female mind works. Putting things together this way and that way, constructing something. Whereas the male mind works like, not like that. Kill! Kill! And as we've seen in the Iliad, what was Achilles' first inclination when Agamemnon took his girl away? Cool! Okay? And so on and so forth. The exception, of course, to this me guy, mad, kill, arete, is that lying sack of turd Odysseus, who was faithful to his wife Penelope the entire time. Okay, it's the last day of classes. You people will believe anything I say. I'm going to take you on an abridged trip of Odysseus' wanderings with a star next to the ones I find especially hint, hint, nudge, nudge, important. Their first stop, Odysseus has a fleet of men. They all bail into the ships and start sailing away from Troy. Yes, they're sailing away, set an open course on an emergency, etc. It's going to take Odysseus 10 years to get home. He's going to get home all alone. It's sad. First stop, island of the Ciconians. That's a joke. It's actually spelled with one C. I was going to tell you that it's a bunch of people who look like Madonna and dress like Madonna. But they sack the city, or believe they're going to sack the city. That's how they win Arete, after all. But they're driven away. It's not that important, except for on this first stop, Odysseus gets 12 jars of red wine, which will help him next time. Lotus. The land of the lotus eaters is kind of like an ancient version of California, where everybody sits around and eats the fruit of the lotus. And once they have eaten the fruit of the lotus, it's like a Bavarian cream donut. You don't really care about anything. You just, okay. Odysseus' men all partake of the fruit of the lotus. And pretty soon, they don't care about Ithaca. They don't care about their boat. They just want to sit there and eat the fruit of the lotus. And Odysseus has to go walk around whapping him upside the head because Odysseus was able to just say no. And get back on the boat. We're going to Ithaca, you jerks. And so they do. Island, stop number 3 is Polyphemus Island. Bring a sense of closure to the class. Polyphemus is a charming cyclops we met at the beginning of the semester, whose eye got poked out by Odysseus. And it wasn't enough that Odysseus got away with poking out his eye. It wasn't enough that Odysseus got back into the boat with, a shipload of men, with his men, and got away. When Polyphemus came out yelling, "Nobody has poked my eye out!" Okay, go ahead.
Odysseus goes back, "No, Odysseus has poked your eye out. I live at blah, 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 in the land."
Darn! I, Odysseus, have poked your eye out. Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca, Box 1, Royal Palace, Ithaca, Greece, 65804. Now, Jeremy, why did he do that?
Just because he could. I mean, he's not the...
Here, let me stare intently at the board.
Cleo?
Yes, 1. Poking the Cyclops' eye out and getting away with it is arete. You know, it's a very heroic... Some might say it's kind of sleazy to poke his eye out when he's asleep and he's drunk, but that would not bug Odysseus in the least. And it makes him pretty famous. My very first memory of something to do with the Odyssey comes from that Kirk Douglas movie circa 1955 with the bad production values, where where Odysseus pokes the Cyclops' eye out. It sticks with you. I was about this high, but I was giving Odysseus Kleos. Wow, that's pretty slick. Oh, he poked his eye out. Okay, that's right. And he wins the undying enmity of Poseidon, which is going to make his trip very dangerous. Stop number 4. I'll put a star by it. Aeolus' Island. On Aeolus' island, Aeolus is the god of the winds. He and his wife live on an island with their 6 sons and their 6 daughters. Wind gods and wind goddesses all. The 6 sons are married to the 6 daughters, and that's okay because they're divine gods and goddesses. Aeolus, the wind god, gives Odysseus a magic bag full of winds. The correct blend of winds and breezes to blow him back to Ithaca. So Odysseus is, opening the bag and directing it into the sail and stuff like that. But his men are such idiots, being male. And what they do is, he got something in bag. He not giving us. And so poor Odysseus, he's pulling an all-nighter. He can just see on the horizon the island of Ithaca, and he drops off. You ever do that? You're just about home, you're driving, and you go, I almost fell asleep out on Route 96 between Carthage and Springfield one time after a 14-hour drive at 3 in the morning. Well, I'm still here to talk about it, but here's what happens. Odysseus falls asleep, the men tear open the bag, all the winds blow out, because they're idiots, and blow him right back to Aeolus' island. Odysseus gets off the boat. Aeolus, you'll never believe what happened. Could I have some more wind? And he is invited to perform etc. No, you may not. Surely the gods hate you, turkey, because it just isn't in the cards. And that's true, because Poseidon hates Odysseus. Stop number 5. Is the Lystrygonians. Not all that important. They just basically eat all of Odysseus' men. They're being cannibals, except for 1 boatload. Odysseus has got to be the worst admiral in the entire ancient Greek navy. I mean, everybody who got on the boat with him, the day that the Trojan War started, they all come back dead, to a man. You would normally feel quite sorry for them, but Homer does a magnificent job of making you feel like, oh, geez, what a bunch of turkeys. They break into his windbag. They get eaten by cannibals. They're dumb. Stop number 6. Circe. 2 stars. In the movie, Hughes' Odyssey, Circe is always played by Cher. A dark woman with a big nose who's kind of scary because she has tattoos all over her. Odysseus and his men, 1 boatload, land on Circe's island. Once they land on Circe's island, they don't know what's going on there. They just see smoke rising from a clearing in the center. And Odysseus very bravely divides his men into 2 groups. 1 group will go investigate the goings-on in the clearing in the middle of the forest, while Group B will bravely stay behind and guard the ship. And guess what group Odysseus bravely stays with? He and his brave men bravely guard the ship. All these other guys go into the clearing to find out what that smoke is. It's Circe. She's sitting there at her loom, weaving. Oh, man. Okay. She waves her magic wand at them, and the men become pigs. Yeah, this had to have been written by a woman. I mean, the men all turn into pigs. Okay, I'm waiting for some woman to raise her hand and say, turn men into pigs? Ha 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 ha. I'm secure in my manliness. I can tell this joke. Except for one guy. One guy breaks away from the herd, I guess. Oh, Circe's house is a real hoot. There's all sorts of guys. You know, some of them are zebra. It looks like erotic animal paradise out there. One guy runs back to the ship and says, Odysseus, there's this woman there. She turned us, all the guys, into pigs. Odysseus goes, ugh. Fortunately, he's walking over to Circe's to do something about it. What happens? Hermes appears to him. Da-da. Yeah, and Hermes says to Odysseus, here, eat some of this magic herb, and it will make you immune to anything she does to you. And when she pulls out her little magic wand to turn you into a pig, you pull out your big, long, manly sword and wave it in her face. Freud would have had a field day with this one, except for Freud was not to be born for another 3,100 years. So it's funny, this is what Hermes tells him to do. And so Odysseus goes, yeah, all right, he eats the herb, and he's walking around, and here comes Circe. Oh, one other thing. Hermes gives him one other piece of advice. Once you pull out your big manly sword, she's going to get all wobbly-kneed and beg you to have sex with her. Do that, because she can help. And so goes his plan. Circe pulls out her little magic wand to put a spell on Odysseus. Odysseus draws out from his sheath his big, manly sword and waves it in her face, and she goes, ah! Oh, I'm sorry, please sleep with me, sir. And he does, because Hermes told him to. Well, Circe changes the men back from pigs into men, and they're better looking once she gets done changing them, and they stay there for a year. Yeah, make it quick, Crystal.
Okay, never mind.
Go ahead, just one for old time's sake.
I thought he was always faithful to his wife.
Oh, good. Yes, he was. And after a year, how's that for an answer? Yes, he was. And then after a year or so, Circe says, you really got to go. Oh, okay. Where do I go? Go to hell! And she sends him on a catabasis. I never knew this. When I yell, the green lights on that thing just go blip. She tells him to go to hell. He goes on a catabasis to Portugal, finds out, among other things, that the afterlife is nasty, brutal, and goes on and on and on and on forever. And comes back knowing just what happens to you after you die, Crystal. And I think I'll make the point in a little bit, but just to set it up, remember, it's only after this that Calypso offers him immortality. He could be Winona Ryder's personal sex toy through all eternity. But if he chooses mortality to be with Penelope, he'll be with Penelope for a while, and then they're both going to die, and life's going to suck forever. That's why I say that in his own way, Odysseus is faithful. And besides, Penelope's going to make him suffer. Stop number 7 is the catabasis, the trip to the underworld. Stop number 8 is the Sirens. Beautiful women with a beautiful with beautiful voices. I'm going to recycle this island. They live on this island, on the rocks, and they sing beautiful music. They sing American music. And it's so beautiful that anybody who hears it wants to swim over to their rock and hear it more clearly, and gets washed up on the rocks and dies, right? Odysseus instructs his men that they're going to have to stick wax in their ears, but before they do this, he has himself tied to the mast of the ship. His ears are not plugged. Odysseus wants to live and take everything that life has to offer. That's what makes him so great. He rules the whole universe. So they lash him to the mast of his ship, stick the earplugs in their ears, and start rowing by the Sirens. You know what happens next. Odysseus's men can't hear a thing. But Odysseus hears the song of the Sirens, and it's beautiful. And he's yelling, "Cut me loose, you jerks! I must swim and hear more of this song." But they can't hear him. So he gets away with hearing the Sirens. Stop number 9, Scylla and Charybdis. Scylla and Charybdis are located really at the Straits of Logans and Straits of Messina in Italy. Supposedly, Scylla is a former lover of Poseidon. She got stuck with 6 to 12 dog heads around her waist. All you Freud buffs, take heed. And Charybdis is the whirlpool, who is Poseidon's daughter. It's a Greek proverb for being caught between a rock and a hard place. You know, which is he going to pick, Scylla or Charybdis? He figures Charybdis will kill everybody, including him. So better to lose 6 to 12 guys to the barking dog heads. And that's what happens. Bringing into island number 10, Cattle of the Sun. Cattle of the Sun. Cattle of the Sun belong to the sun god. The sun god is Circe's dad. Circe had warned them, guys, you may wind up on the island of my dad Helios. You may wind up on the island of his cattle. Whatever you do, don't kill any of his cattle. He doesn't like that. And so they land on the island of the Cattle of the Sun, and they're stuck there for a month. No wind, no nothing. And Odysseus says, "You slobs, don't eat any of the beef." And they don't. But one night while Odysseus is asleep, they kill one cow and sacrifice it to Zeus. Oh, Zeus, oh, Zeus, oh, Zeus. They burn, just about everything. They just save enough for some hamburgers and stuff while Odysseus is asleep. Odysseus wakes up, somebody's, handing him a cold hamburger. Where did you get that hamburger? Oh, we just killed one of the cattle, Odysseus. Okay, and you know what happens. The wind picks up. They all get onto the boat. They start sailing away to Ithaca. The weather starts getting rough. The tiny ship gets tossed. Since they have eaten the cattle of the sun, since Poseidon is mad at them, since they have not listened to Circe, there's a massive storm and a massive shipwreck, and everybody dies except for Odysseus. Odysseus is rescued by Calypso, which is where we found him at the beginning of our flashback sequence. Odysseus tells the people in Phaeacia, and then I stayed with Calypso for 7 years, but trust me, I was faithful to my wife Penelope the entire time. Really, I was, because I turned down immortality to be with her, and I don't know if I'm even going to make it. And to make a long story short, the people on Phaeacia tell him, "Yes, that was a very nice story, Odysseus. We'll take you and drop you off on your home island of Ithaca." This is the first half of the Odyssey. The second half I can dispense with pretty quickly. which is just as well because the second half of the Odyssey takes forever. It's padded. The basic plan is that Odysseus has to make his way home to Penelope. He could try not, "Hi Penelope, I'm home." That ain't going to cut it. Number one, who's to say Penelope would believe him? Number two, who's to say Penelope doesn't want to put him through some trouble first? You know, she's been tending the home fires. Yeah, have you been faithful to me, Odysseus, over the last 20 years, a manly man like you? And something else, a very human interest story thing, maybe you've experienced it, or if you haven't, you will. You will meet someone you will love as your other, as your second self. Then the two of you will get into a spat. And you'll both feel horrible. But each of you in your own right is going to want to make the other one admit to being wrong first. This happens with me and my beloved wife. "Oh, I'm so sorry we got mad at each other." "But you were wrong. Admit it." And so on and so forth. And it's like this grim struggle of wills to find out who missed the other one more. Ha. Oh, I could tell you about all the grody little details about how the suitor, Odysseus dresses up as a beggar and goes into his own house disguised as a beggar to see how the suitors treat this old beggar. Kind of like Tom Sawyer going to his own funeral, right? Except for this was 3,100 years before Samuel Langhorne Clemens. How do the suitors treat the disguised Odysseus? They're mean to him. They throw things at him. There's one guy who bullies him. That's not good. He goes around to various of people in his homeland of Ithaca asking for help. "Could you give me a cloak? Could you put me up for the night?" Nobody is willing to help him except for one guy, a swineherd. You know, he's sleeping in a sty with his pigs or something. He's not quite that bad, but not that far off either. And only the swineherd. The swineherd's name is Eumaeus. I put it on the board because he's a nice guy. Eumaeus puts him up for the night. And pretty soon Eumaeus and Odysseus are plotting how to get back into the palace, how to get back to Penelope. Telemachus joins the team too. That's Odysseus' son. I'm just giving you a few of the high points. There's one scene I have to tell you about. It's a scene about Argus the dog. Argus the dog was only a puppy when Odysseus left for the Trojan War. Odysseus had just trained him to be a hunting dog. And this is going to be the first person the first creature to recognize Odysseus when he lands on Ithaca. Odysseus is disguised, and he's coming up to his palace. And he sees an old dog lying flea-bitten and moth-eaten, half dead on a big pile of poop. A big reeking pile of poop outside the palace of Odysseus. And Odysseus, who's in disguise, thinks to himself this might have been a good hunting dog at one time, but he is very old, and indeed he was, because he had been trained by Odysseus himself. And Odysseus had never himself gotten joy of hunting with the dog, yada yada. The dog looks and sees the stranger, recognizes Odysseus, his tail goes thump, and a tear forms in his eye, and he dies. Very happy because he's seen Odysseus. I mean, I want to cry whenever I read this. But there's also scenes of, hoo-ha, like I said, that the servants, the serving girls, the suitors are all really mean to the beggar Odysseus. Odysseus, the beggar in disguise, asks for an interview with Penelope. And goes in there, and Penelope says, "Now, stranger, do you have any word of my husband Odysseus?" It's within his power to say, "Yeah, it's me!" But he won't, because he wants to prove that she missed him more. Okay? And, you know, this old slave lady comes out to give him a nice foot bath and pulls up his well-grieved sock or what have you to show a scar, a hunting scar that Odysseus had got when he was a kid. And if Penelope had seen it, she'd know right away it was Odysseus. But Athena turns Penelope's head so she can't see the hunting scar that Odysseus got when he was a little boy, because we all haven't suffered enough yet. Try reading this in ancient Greek. And Penelope asks the stranger, now, did you see Odysseus? And Odysseus, I mean, he's a real lying sack of crap too. Yeah, I saw him in Egypt. He missed Penelope. Man, he's coming this way, you know. He might be coming this way. He was looking pretty scruffy. Don't know if he's going to make it. You know, they're testing each other. Does Penelope know this is Odysseus? Yeah, she does. And she says, well, I hope he gets here soon, because tomorrow morning I'm going to have a contest to see which of the suitors gets to marry me. I'm going to set up 12 axe handles in a row. I'm so sick and tired. I miss Odysseus very much, but you know, a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do, stranger. Certainly you know that. Ancient Greek axe handles looked like this. You put the rock through the handle and make it into an axe. Tomorrow morning, whoever can string the bow of Odysseus and shoot it through 12 axe handles gets to have me as his wife. Now, this guy's Odysseus, right? And he goes, that sounds like a good idea, lady. And he stumbles back off the swineherd's house. Well, the next day rises. All the suitors are really pumped up. They've been partying all night. They're going to take it to the max. They're going to have a competition to see who gets to win the hand of Penelope after all these years. And the beggar comes in. They take turns. The suitors take turns stringing the bow, or trying to string the bow of Odysseus, but they can't even bend it because they're not worthy. Then the beggar says, let me try it. So I said, this ought to be good. The beggar puts the string to the bow. Jaws start to drop. He puts an arrow to it. Thwap! Shoots it through all 12 axe heads. Pulls out another arrow. Thwap! And starts massacring the suitors. From his spot in the balcony, Telemachus pew, 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 picks off suitors. The noble swineherd Eumaeus pulls out his AK-47. Pretty soon we're all knee-deep in gore. Odysseus, because we know it's him now, asks for an interview with the lady, Queen Penelope. Who is it? He's still not going to say it's Odysseus, because he wants to prove that she missed him more than he missed her. Well, it's me, the beggar. I killed all the other suitors. Won't be troubling you, ma'am. I just place to hang my hat for the night and I'll be on my way. And Telemachus, the son of Odysseus, and Mom, don't be a bitch, Mom. Mom. It's sad. I mean, yeah, you chuckle, you laugh. You ever see your parents get hacked off at each other for no reason at all? It'd be so easy to just get them together. They're messing with you. Multiply that times 20 years. Mom, it's Dad. And Penelope says, yes, you can spend the night, stranger. There's a place out on the porch. There's a bed out on the porch that Odysseus once carved for us on our wedding night. He painted for our wedding. He severed a tree, and then he embroidered, he puts mattresses of sedge grass on the top. And I put it out on the porch. Why don't you sleep on that? What? That bed I made for you, and you put it out on the porch? After all these years, have you no regard? Penelope looks at him and goes, because she beat me. She wins. She wins hands down. Odysseus says, I can't believe you did that, Penelope. That's you, isn't it, Odysseus? I win! And then, you know what they do? They go to bed immediately and perform the love deed. They missed each other. And only then do they talk about their various adventures. Yeah, I met a few women, but nothing serious, you know, dear. And the next day, Odysseus goes and visits his dad. The end. The end of the Odyssey. The end of the class. While Odysseus and Penelope are sleeping, it's time to round off, you know, the classical mythology experience, to say good night and make a few remarks before we all toddle off to sleep too. Actually, you have an exam to take. I'm going to go to sleep. We've covered an awful lot of myths in this class. We have invested these myths with all sorts of significance. Sometimes we agreed that the X myth bore a certain significance. Sometimes we rejected the significance of a myth and said, no, it's just mere entertainment, pure and simple. And some of the myths, quite frankly, weren't even entertaining or profound. They're there for us. There are a lot of things you can use, a lot of scholarly purposes for which you can use classical mythology, the legends, sagas, and myths of the ancient Greeks and Romans. As I've said, as I pointed out at the beginning of this class, they are a fascinating historical document of the ancient people of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. They talk to us about ancient Greeks and ancient Roman concerns, lifestyles, beliefs, in a way that no history book ever could. They also tell us a lot about, if you will, the ancient mind at work. That is to say, their ways of thinking about things. Just to offer you one example, we've seen over and over and over again that the Greeks and ancient Greeks and ancient Romans were not really big on the concept of mutual exclusivity. If one myth says that Aphrodite was the daughter of Zeus and Dione, and another myth said that she was born when Uranus's severed genitalia splashed down in the ocean, as skeptical children of the 20th century, we say it's either one or the other, but not both. The ancient Greeks were perfectly willing to accept both. That tells us something about the ancient Greeks right there. That's the sort of insight you can really only get from reading the myths. That's something you could read in a history book, but it would never come home to you. We have learned all sorts of things about the psyche through our study of classical mythology, the individual soul, the personality, and whatnot. In the play Hippolytus, for example, we have seen that the various stages of love at work. We have seen the denial phase. We have seen the, oh, well, maybe just a little bit phase. We have seen the rejection phase. We have seen the feelings of children towards opposite-sex parents in Oedipus Rex. And there are more such psychological insights to be obtained in classical literature and classical mythology. That's all really worthwhile, too. History. We have seen, it's been kind of a major theme in the last few weeks of the course, that legend by its very nature contains a kernel of historical fact. As a Reformed history major, I got out of it just in time. I have to admit that I find this myself specially compelling, that Homer, for example, in his poetry about the Trojan War, has preserved for us all sorts of really interesting little historical details that might otherwise have been lost. That the ancient Greeks did possess siege machinery as early as 1200 BC. That they did like to roll up towers to fortified cities, that the Mycenaean era Greece was a series of city-states with no central government, merely one king, the king of Mycenae, who was more influential and powerful than the rest, hereditarily so. That's all pretty interesting stuff to me, too. But what I find most interesting, and I think that, if anything, this is what I would like to leave you folks with, is that classical mythology, far more than ancient history, far more than the study of ancient Greek and the study of Latin, classical mythology and its sibling, comparative mythology, LLT 321, have to throw in a plug for that, is a way to meet our ancestors, is a way to encounter our ancient Greek and Roman forebears as they really were, and whether or not one is descended from ancient Greeks or ancient Romans, they are still, of course, our intellectual and spiritual ancestors. It's a chance to see these people, a chance to understand at a gut level what makes them tick. The most recent classical quote-unquote themed movie to come out at this taping is Disney's Hercules. As I've suggested in my comments on the Hercules myth a few weeks back, civilizations tend to reinterpret Heracles as one of the most popular of all Greek heroes over and over again. And as an individual civilization changes over, as it evolves or is replaced by another civilization, the constant is that Heracles will be there, if nothing else. It may be interesting, it's instructive for us to know that the original Heracles, the Heracles we encounter in the Odyssey and the Iliad, was just a two-fisted brawler who stuck Hera in the left breast with a 3-barbed arrow, among other things. This is not really family values. This fellow is as rude and crude as they go. By the time that philosophers such as Socrates, but more precisely Prodicus of Chaos, got a hold of him, he'd already become somewhat of a philosophical hero. This by the year, say, 400 BC. By the time of Christ, let us say, the Stoic philosophers had converted Heracles into a complete role model for the aspiring Socratic philosopher, or Stoic philosopher. That is to say, when given the choice between virtue and vice, Heracles would choose virtue, even though it's a harder path, less enjoyable, and whatnot. 200 years later, the Roman Emperor Commodus basically declared that he was Heracles, not the Stoic philosopher Brand Heracles. We're talking about the Heracles who wore lion skins, slept with women 50 at a time, shot bizarre-looking animals and the like from the safety of his booth in the Colosseum. Hercules, it only took 2 centuries to become completely unphilosophized. Hercules the philosopher makes a comeback of sorts in the Renaissance, but today Heracles is pretty much still a philosophical. By studying the changes in which each society has regarded Heracles, what is it about Heracles and his nature that made him so adaptable to philosophy in the eyes of the ancient Greeks and the Republican Romans and the early imperial Romans, and what was it about Heracles that made it so attractive for the Emperor Commodus right around 192 AD to say, hey, I'm Hercules? Apparently, the historians tell us that the Roman people, the average people in the street, just loved it. They loved having Hercules as their ruler. They bought into it. They thought it was great. They wanted him to keep it up. They wanted more. And today, people are bringing their little kids to see little Hercules dance around and, go figure it out. But this, to me, is a true value of classical mythology. It provides us, all of us, with an unbelievable opportunity, an enjoyable opportunity to come into contact with the culture, the belief system, and most of all, the stories of our cultural forebears, the Greeks and Romans. You may have noticed that the class has been rather short on hard and fast answers. Very seldom during the course of this class have I been able to provide answers that will completely satisfy you skeptical children of the 20th, soon-to-be 21st century. I have pleaded all the way along that that's the nature of the material, and it really is. What I hope finally you have gained is an interest in the stories, a familiarity with the major characters of the stories, a little understanding about the civilizations that produced these stories, so that as you go on in life, you can interpret these stories, you can read these stories, have an appreciation for where these stories came from, and use them for your own personal purposes. Enjoy them for your own personal purposes, whether you just want to laugh or whether you want to understand your soul, if you want to understand ancient religion better. You know, these opportunities are available to you. This isn't going to make you very wealthy, the knowledge that we've had in this class. But I hope that you've enjoyed it and you have found it's something that you will continue to enjoy as you go through life. I know I have. Thank you.